268B in Dickson, Tennessee, serving Dickson County. Turn it up. Streaming online at WDKN.com.
I love listening to it over and over. I love it.
This is 101.5 The One and WDKN, Dixon's country music home.
You're listening to The Old Timers Show, presented by RFC Broadband on Dixon's only live and local station, 101.5 The One and WDKN. Now, here's your host.
Good morning. It's Saturday, February the 12th, and you're listening to the Old Timers program here on WDKN Radio. Got an exciting show for you today. Got Mr. Edward England Jr. in the studio with us, and we're going to talk about a few different topics in history. Good morning, Edward. How are you today?
Good morning, Justin. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, I appreciate you coming into the studio this morning. We're going to talk about a few different things. Yeah. But before we get into some of the different topics that we have decided to talk about, let's, if you don't mind, let the people know just a little bit about you and where you grew up, maybe who your folks were, or, family are, and who Mr. Edward England is.
Well, Mr. Edward England, of course, is my father. But Dad was raised down in the Cheatham County line and Dickson County line on the Harpeth River. My mother was Marie Jones. She was from Nashville. They married in 1953, and in 1954, Dad was drafted. They found out that I was on the way, so Dad did his basic training for armored infantry at Fort Knox. He was sent to his duty station at Fort Hood, Texas. He brought us down there. I was born on the base in Texas, there at Fort Hood. And then after Dad's service was up, we came back here to Tennessee.
Wow.
So I've been here all my life.
All right. Well, very interesting. You know a lot about the history of Dickson County.
Yes.
There's a few guys, I'd say like a handful, who have really done a good job of making sure that history stays alive. And I do appreciate you doing that. There is a group on Facebook and I know we talk about this on the show quite a bit, but it's because the group is very important. There's a group on Facebook that we're both a part of. It's called Discovering Dickson County, and we get the chance to share a lot of information there and talk about a lot of different things. And I appreciate the work that you do as an administrator of that group and making sure that it stays a good group and making sure that there's good content there for all of us to look at. And one of the subjects that you and I have talked about quite a bit is something that I'm very interested in as somebody who's a teacher over at the Dickson County High School. We're celebrating this year a lot of 50ths because it's been right at 50 years since the high school was built. And it's been the this past season, football season, was the 50th football season. Next year, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first graduating class. And you were part of that class,
yes.
That first class that graduated in the spring of 1973. But 1 year earlier, in the spring of 1972, you guys were getting together for spring football practice.
Right.
And the Cougars, for those that don't know the history of the county and the school system, there were actually three high schools from three different communities that all came together to start Dickson County High School. Could you kind of explain how that went down?
Well, I went to William James. We didn't have preschool or kindergarten when I started there, but I went the first 11 years. And they decided to consolidate the county, so there was William James, Charlotte, and Dickson. And the Dickson High School was where Dickson Middle is now. And so we were actually part of who chose the colors, the mascot, and some other things.
And that was a pretty interesting deal there with as far as picking, right? Because there was three different schools. You had Charlotte, which was the Tigers, if I remember correctly. They were black and gold, basically. Yes. You had William James, which was the school in White Bluff, and they were purple and gold, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, still around as middle schools. And then you had the Dickson Dragons, maroon and white. And so they wanted to pick something that was a little neutral from those three schools, right?
Right. They had a committee of representatives from all three schools. That was actually the deciding committee. They're the ones who came up with three options. I do remember that Cobras was one option, and of course Cougars and Cavaliers.
Wow.
Now,
all C's, I noticed.
yes, noticed.
Interesting.
And then they had other color schemes. They had, for one, the teal and green, or teal and orange. Think Miami Dolphins.
Right.
And then they had another color. I can't remember exactly what that was, but of course we ended up with orange and navy for the Cougars. And they finally put it to a vote for all schools, and we know who came out on top. Now let's fast forward into the spring football practice. I only played 1 year at White Bluff and on the last team there. And when we started spring football practice, they first took all of us from Charlotte and White Bluff and sent us to Dickson. So we did 2 weeks in Dickson, turned around, went 2 weeks in Charlotte, and then we went 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of the 6-week spring training in White Bluff. So we had some logistics to share, but you gotta remember we had three rivals.
Mm-hmm.
Always fought tooth and nail over these in sports and probably other things, and we were gelling to make something new that was exciting. And so many of us, including myself, did not look forward to it, because you're leaving something, you're leaving your comfort zone, you're leaving everything you've always known.
And there was a lot of tradition in
there
these
was a
communities.
lot of tradition in all three of these schools, exactly. And like I said, the rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we came together, and we came together.
So
and it was exciting.
What was it like those when you got all three schools together? Because they did, like you said, they did have their tradition, and I'm sure they had certain leaders on each team. And then you're trying to bring that together with not just two, but three different schools, trying to meld, kind of mesh that together. Were there any fights? Did people get along pretty well? How did that go?
When it came to the players, all of us got along just wonderfully. It was an incredible experience. As I said, I was apprehensive in myself, but when we come together, it turned out to be something I've always looked back and be glad I went through it and was part of it. And then when fall came, the opening was actually delayed for a short while because of some construction issues. And I don't remember for sure, but I think it was over the swimming area.
Okay.
But we had actually already played 2 ball games before we even opened the school. And of course, the first football game was against Columbia. And
that was a very interesting season, wasn't it?
It was. We won the first 7 games. We only had 9 games because we were a new school and couldn't get a 10th. But then, of course, we went on to a bowl game. We played in the Tobacco Bowl at Hartsville against Maplewood.
Well, it was a very interesting season. I'd like to ask you just a little bit more about that. But before you do, let's take us a little break. Sure. We're listening to the Old Timers program this morning. We've got Mr. Edward England Jr. in here talking with us, who was a member of the very first graduating class over at Dickson County High School in 1973. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. I want to ask you a few more questions about that. You're listening to the Old Timers Show here on WDKN.
Let's talk about your internet options in this area. Cable internet, cell phone internet, and the phone company. Does that cover it? And not everybody has all 3 options. So if you're looking to make a change, try RFC Broadband, a local business right here in Dickson, offering the speeds you need at prices you can afford with no data caps. 615-375-8662 or rfcbroadband.com.
In times of joy, in moments of grief, broadcasters come through, even when all else fails. Today, with more ways than ever to experience the moments that transform our lives, Americans still choose broadcast radio and television more than all other media combined. We are the local broadcasters of radio and television, reaching more people, touching more lives. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Let's face it, life looks a little different. During these times, we're doing our best to keep our minds and bodies strong. And getting a flu shot helps us stay healthy, so we don't miss out on what matters. Like having game night at home. Yeah, can't do that while sick with the flu. Now imagine family movie night that your daughter can't live without. Well, that's ruined. And don't forget your uncle's socially distanced cookout. See, that's why it's important to be at our strongest. Every year, millions of people in the U.S. get the flu. Especially now, no one has time to miss out on moments that matter. So get your flu shot. Find out more at getmyflushot.org. Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
We're back here on the Old Timers program. Today is February the 12th, 2022, and we've got a good show going for you this morning. Me and Mr. Edward England Jr. are in the studio live, and we're talking about all kinds of different historical things, but we've started off with talking a little bit about the Dickson County High School. But before we get back into that, though, we were talking a little bit at break here. We want to send a shout-out to Mr. Robert Freeman, who does the morning show here during the week. Unfortunately, his aunt passed away, I believe, maybe yesterday, and we just wanted to let Robert know, if he's listening this morning, that our thoughts and prayers are with him this morning as he's going through a tough time. And I know, Edward, I know you've known Robert for a really long time, and you guys are real close. Yes. So we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that this morning before we went any further. But we're here on the Old Timers program. We're talking about the very first year of the Dickson County High School, which is back in the 1972-1973 school year. And Edward's just been talking to us a little bit about what it was like to be a student back then. He was in his senior year, was part of that first class, and telling us a little bit about the football team. The football team came together. There was 3 different schools. They had to, leave behind the identities of those old teams, the Colonels, the Tigers, and the Dragons, and form something new. And they decided on the colors orange and blue, and started practicing that spring. And it all came together that fall, didn't it? It was a special season. Tell me a little bit about that. So the first game was against Columbia, and how did that first game go?
Well, of course, we probably weren't given much of a chance, but we actually won the game. I remember it was we had 2 of the best running backs, Herschel Horner and Terry Haynes. Randy Reed was the quarterback. We had a very good line. But, I'll give you a program a while back. If you look on that program, notice that only maybe 3 or 4 people are over 200 pounds.
Right.
So we were small.
That's what a lot of people notice when we get to looking at those old artifacts is the size of the guys, back then.
And, of course, we had, I know in that game that a friend of mine, Mike Burgess, made at least 2 interceptions, 1 to seal the game. Mm-hmm. And so our very first competition in sports, as I said, we won. So it was an exciting time. I remember there was standing room only all the way around the track. Everybody came to see the new Cougars. How bad we were going to fail or how good we were going to be.
And that was a very impressive stadium, which it still is, but when it was built back in the early 70s, my understanding is it was second to none, that it was, a great, huge, big stadium that was big enough to hold everybody in the county that wanted to come watch.
It's bigger now, so it's been it's a great facility. I do want to give a shout out about, you were talking about us coming together. Our coaching staff was also second to none. Coach Pearson, wonderful man. We all loved him. And, of course, he's still around out there somewhere. Dennis Fuzzle, Charlie Daniel, not Charlie Daniel, Beanie Daniel, Reed Evans. I've had a high amount of respect for Coach Evans. He was actually my personal coach. And the man never told me anything he didn't think I needed to know. And I just had to learn that I needed to know it.
Yeah.
And then there's Coach Charlie Pruitt. Everybody loved Charlie Pruitt. He was, across the board, I think everybody's favorite overall person, and I'm not talking about just a football team. I saw Coach Pruitt about a week before he passed away. He came up to me at Kroger and was picking on me. That was just him. But it didn't matter where I was. Whenever he saw me, I was a slacker. So that's just the way he was. But Coach Pruitt was a genuine human being, and I'm sure everybody knew him, misses him.
Yes, and it's interesting how we remember our coaches. I remember fondly several of my coaches growing up, and they hold special places in your heart because they're there for you when you're a young man and helping you come up, and it's fun to get a chance to see them later on and have those conversations. And I know that the coaching staff was very special that year. So you guys had a good season, Tell me what the record was again.
7-2.
7-2, and won the first how many games?
7
games. So had a really good run there at the beginning,
right.
And then I guess we just kind of lost some steam at the end. But we finished pretty strong, got into a bowl game, and then just kind of built off of that, right, over the years, and got better and better. And the program is having a turnaround right now. We just got a new coach recently, Coach Tomlinson, and so we're looking forward to going in a new direction and hopefully get back to our winning ways from way back then. So I appreciate you talking to me a little bit about that this morning. If you want to kind of shift topics a little bit, because we got a few things I know that we want to talk about. We still got a few more minutes in this segment. Let's talk a little bit about Native American history, and the reason I say this is because you and I have had some really interesting conversations about several landmarks that are either in Dickson County or maybe just on the other side of our border, maybe that used to be part of Dickson County. But there's definitely some interesting Native American history right here within our borders of Dickson County. And why don't you talk to us just a little bit about that? I know you found some interesting artifacts.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised where you find artifacts. I know that the land which my parents owned, and of course I own now, we have picked up artifacts all over that place.
And where exactly is this in the county?
Just outside of White Bluff White Bluff and Pleasant View Road.
Okay.
And there's a large spring down at the base of the hill, and Dad and I built the house that I live in, and we moved in '68. The same time that we moved into the house, I started picking up arrowheads in the yard and other tools. So we picked up quite a few different types of tools and cutting instruments and, like I said, points. And it just sort of fueled something that I enjoyed. And so then Dad and I we were farmed, and we farmed to other areas. Bell's Bend down the Harpeth River, below the Narrows of Harpeth. And over 50 plus years, I collected quite a bit of stuff. I did have a thing about giving things away. So I have probably given away much more than I still have, mostly to children, because I want to fuel their interests.
And what type of things would you give away exactly?
Well, usually I just give them a point, because they don't understand a cutting tool or a celt or scraping tool or anything like that. They don't understand what that is, but they see an arrowhead because it's got its own unique features. And a lot of times I give them away to children who were having health issues. Maybe they couldn't get out. One boy had spinal bifida, and something that he could not get up and get active, but he could still sit there and fiddle with and imagine things and take his mind off of some other issues maybe. So I always enjoy doing that.
I think that the kids really enjoy seeing things, items, things that they can hold, they can touch. And I think that really brings history to them just a little bit more. As somebody who teaches kids on a daily basis, my full-time job is I'm a teacher, history teacher. It really makes a difference if, they have something that they can hold and they can touch. I mean, reading a book is great. Watching parts of a movie is good. Really brings things to life. But there's nothing quite like holding an actual artifact from the past.
Right.
It really changes things. And I was lucky enough last year that you were able to share a few things with me. You have a lot of different artifacts. You have, some Native American points, arrowheads, things like that, little tools. But you also have some Civil War stuff. And when I was a teacher at the Dickson Middle School, past few years, in 8th grade, we teach the Civil War. And there's nothing like having some, actual artifacts that the students can see and they can touch and they can hold. It really makes a difference. I remember I asked them at the last day of the school year, I always do this. I ask them what was their favorite thing that we did that year, because I want to make a note of it. I want to make sure that I always do that, so that they can have the most fun possible. And at the end of last year, they told me that the best day was the day that I brought in these Civil War artifacts, things that had actually been dug out of the ground in Dickson County, little bullets, little shells, just all kinds of different things that you let me borrow, and I let the students get to see those things, and it really made a big difference for them. And I appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate you,
Anytime.
keeping up with that stuff, and then also being willing to let somebody run off with it for a couple of weeks and trusting me to bring it back to you, some priceless items. I can't thank you enough for that. But it does make a difference, like you said.
I think so.
And that's good that you've. It's good to save things, but I guess it's also good to share things as well.
Well, it's just like a lot of people here, of course, know Carl Pettis, and I've always heard. Now, I never had him as a teacher, but he is a very good friend. And I've always heard that Mr. Pettis was really good at making history come alive.
Yes.
And that's all I've ever heard about him. Nobody has ever said anything bad about his classes that I've ever heard. And I believe that's the way we need to do. We do need to keep history accurate, good and bad, learn from it, find out where we have been, how we got where we are today, and feel blessed that we live in a country that is able to overcome so much adversity and controversy and things that we've done in the past. But we've got to do it by keeping the history alive. Learn from it. If you don't like it, still learn from it. And I think we need to know that.
And you definitely have been one that's kept those things alive. You, Mr. Tony England, who was here last week, and there's several others that I hope to get on the show in the coming weeks. And I hope you can help me maybe convince a few guys to jump on the show here and tell their story, because it's always fun to talk about all these different things. We're going to take another break. We're running out of time here. I hate it. I wish we had much more time that we could sit and talk. But we'll come back and wrap up the show. We'll take another break here. You're listening to the Old Timers Show here on WDKN. We'll be right back after this break.
Let's talk about your internet options in this area: cable internet, cell phone internet, and the phone company. Does that cover it? And not everybody has all three options. So if you're looking to make a change, try RFC Broadband, a local business right here in Dickson, offering the speeds you need at prices you can afford with no data caps. 615-375-8662 or rfcbroadband.com.
You want to feel connected, at one with your world, informed, included, and inspired. So no matter where you are,
we have an accident on the expressway.
When important things happen,
you see this man, contact authorities immediately.
We're here, at all hours, in the moment, on every device in your life. Your local radio and TV broadcasters. We investigate and inform.
Our political investigation saved taxpayers.
Give back to the community.
Our radio station is now accepting donations to help rebuild this community.
Even save lives.
It is time to just hunker down. It's too late now to leave.
America's #1 source for news, weather, and information on your radio, TV, computer, tablet, and smartphone. We are broadcasters. Always here for you, wherever here may be. Tell Washington local stations matter by texting radio to 52886. Furnished by NAB and the station. Message and data rates may apply.
And we're back here on the Old Timers program. We've got Mr. Edward England Jr. in here. We were just talking over the break about how short the show actually seems when you're actually doing it. It's 30 minutes just goes by so quick, and there's so many more things that we could talk about. You want to talk a little bit more about the Native Americans, or do you want to move on?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, let's. So we were talking just a little bit more before the break about some of the different artifacts that you'd found out near White Bluff on your family land, and there's something out there that people find fascinating, and we've had a chance to talk about this in the Facebook group a few times. But there's some Native American symbols that were painted.
Bluff.
Yeah, it's called paint. We call it Paint Rock.
Paint Rock Bluff. Of course, a lot of people get that confused with Paint Rock Bluff on the Duck River. Now, on the Duck River, what was there is now pretty much gone. There's another place in Kingston Springs called Buffalo Gap. Most of it's gone. But Paint Rock is on the Harpeth River, is at the Cheatham and Dickson County line. It's been damaged by people who probably had too much, who were having too much fun.
Yeah.
Down there camping on the river, using it for target practice. But I have photographs of it. It's about 250 feet up on the side of the bluff. I've actually been within about 20 feet of it, but it was too dangerous to proceed.
Now tell us, what is it exactly? Is it a carving or a painting, or how would you describe it?
It's a painting.
A painting.
Now there is a book, and anybody who's interested in Native history in the Southeast, it's called Sun Circles and Human Hands. It's one of my favorite books, and it does look like a sun circle. It's large, it's round, painted red. And then there's another symbol beside it. Some say it looks like one thing, some another. But unfortunately, as I said, it's been damaged to some extent. But my father actually at one time owned the top of the bluff. But it has been sold out of the family since. And so now pretty much the only way to get to it is float down the river. The other side of it's private property. So it's a very interesting spiritual place to me. I have picked up artifacts up there in the old logging roads. I know I've had friends who said that they have actually been up there, and that there is a cavity up there. And I know in the photographs I have, there is a cavity, but I can't tell much more about that. We have that, and then we also have what we call Red 7 Bluff on the Leatherwood Creek.
Tell me a little bit about that.
It has changed a lot over the years. It's fracked off where just the weather, basically the elements, and it's only maybe 70 feet. But then of course we have, to me, one of the greatest treasures around, which is Mound Bottom.
Right, and it's actually just outside of Dickson County now, but
yeah,
it used to be part of Dickson County a long time
years
ago.
And of course, Mound Bottom is most well known. But then there's another set of mounds on Highway 70 right behind the skating rink that was just destroyed by the tornado. If you look directly behind, over there on that high point, there's a mound up there. And a very close friend of mine, his father, when he passed away, he desired to be buried there on that mound, or at that base of that mound. And because, well, they owned the property at the time. So the Native American history in this area is very rich. And I know we're getting close to the end of this program. But as we were talking about a minute ago, to me, preserving these things for the future helps to learn about the past.
Right.
We need to honor those who were here before. The mound builders themselves were gone when the first Europeans started coming into the area. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know if they died out or moved on or what. But as I said, they were already gone. And the Europeans came in, they found these immense mounds out there, but they did not know anything about the people. But to imagine the culture that had to be there, the archaeological digs that have been performed. There's so much we can learn from the past and honor for the past. And that's why I feel like it's so important to keep it alive on our website, or our group, and in your classrooms, and just as individuals. I know a lady who's 105 years old right now. And the amount of knowledge and experience that woman has seen, going from horse and buggy days to seeing a man land on the moon, to a time whenever we can have a device that you have on the table in front of you right now, that holds probably most of the information in the world on,
It's amazing how far we've come.
It is.
It
Technology
really is.
has been absolutely wonderful. It's a little frightening sometimes. Anything can be misused, but we do know that our technology and our knowledge today of the past and the present is unsurmounted.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today. We are here at the end of the show, and so we've got Mr. Dale Reagan coming in next to do his show, and then I'll be back at 8 o'clock to do an episode of Know Your County. But I thank you so much, Mr. England, for coming in here today and doing this show with me and talking about all these different things. So maybe we can get you back on again soon and
It's been an honor and a privilege.
talk
I
about a
appreciate
few more
it.
things in the future. So
Thank you very much.
thank you, and we'll be back here in just a few minutes with Mr. Dale Reagan. Stay tuned to stay tuned to WDKN. We'll be back with Know Your County in 30 minutes.
In times of joy,